I'd like to call this meeting of the New Hanover County Board of Education to order. Please stand for the invocation and our Pledge of Allegiance and National Anthem. We'll have our invocation. Lord, we thank you for this day, this opportunity to gather here tonight to discuss educational issues that affect the young people in our county. Be with us, provide us wisdom, good judgment. Also, we ask that you be with leaders all across this country in the dilemmas and the situations that we face as a country. Be with them, provide them wisdom and guidance. In your holy name we pray. Amen. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may be seated.
My name is Jake Rose. My name is Naomi Boring.
My name is Laura McGowan, and we are all in Ms. Porter's 5th grade class at Bellamy Elementary School.
And the instructor is?
Emily Curtis.
Thank you very much. He's with the Bellamy Eagles. The principal of the school is Dr. Benny Bryant. We appreciate you being here tonight, being part of our ceremony. Sorry. So what did I do? Ms. Adams, we call the roll, please.
Donald S. Hayes.
Here.
Jeanette S. Nichols.
Here.
Janice A. Cavanaugh.
Here.
Tammy J. Coble.
Here.
Lisa Eastet. Edward B. Higgins.
Here.
Bruce T. Shaw.
Here.
Thank you. Item 2 is approval of the agenda. Any changes, deletions, or additions?
I will have an item B under superintendent's report. It'll be a compensation review committee.
Compensation.
Review.
Motion to approve.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? They are approved. Item 3, approval of the minutes. Item A, our regular meeting, February the 10th, 2015.
Move for approval. Second.
Any questions, comments? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? They are approved. Item 4, recognition of achievement.
Good afternoon, everyone.
We have 3 recognitions this evening. Our first recognition goes to a company known as Mobility 101. Mobility 101 is a company that specializes in technology that makes homes, businesses, and public facilities accessible to individuals with disabilities. Since 2012, they have partnered with the specially designed academics program at Coddington Elementary School to provide elaborate costumes for a fall parade for our students there. The Mobility 101 staff visits the students to get to know their personalities before designing each student a special one-of-a-kind costume. Because of their proven commitment to partnering with public education and their continued generosity and creativity, tonight we'd like to recognize Mobility 101. If Ms. Lauren Davenport, if you're here on behalf of Mobility, would you please come forward? And also Mr. Furman, would you come up, please? Assistant Principal Dolores Overby and the SDA teacher, Vanessa Bishop. We'd like you all to come up for a group photo. Thank you all again for what you do for our students at Coddington. Our next recognition is for one of our physical education teachers at Anderson Elementary School, and his name is Mr. Curtis Fallon. Mr. Fallon is one of only 13 National American Heart Association Jump Rope for Heart, Hoops for Heart grant recipients. Because of Mr. Fallon's efforts, Anderson Elementary will receive a $2,500 grant to support its physical education program. I think that's wonderful. Mr. Fallon, if you're here, would you please come forward so we can recognize you? Congratulations, Mr. Fallon, Ms. Piner, and everyone at Anderson. And our final recognition of the evening is very special, and I'd like to thank Ms. Estep for bringing it to our attention. It is for a senior from Ashley High School, and this student was recently named the North Carolina High School Athletic Association State Champion for wrestling. I mean, that means he's #1 in the whole state. I think this is amazing. And as I understand, this student has also an incredible winning record throughout his career as a wrestler and is the first Screaming Eagle to win a wrestling title. So the student's name is Joe Mondragon. Joe, if you're here, would you please come forward? We're so proud of you, Joe. And if your family's here, if Joe's family's here, would you please stand? Congratulations on this outstanding achievement. Mr. Norable and your athletic director, Mr. Turner, and Coach Alex Smith, we're all very proud of Joe. Congratulations to the Screaming Eagles. And that concludes our recognition program. Thank you all so much.
Next item, excuse me, next item on the agenda is our call to the audience. Related to agenda items, our first individual signed up, Amanda Dotsey.
Pass this to somebody. This is a petition from Bentry regarding the redistricting. Do you want this?
You, Mr. Board, can accept that.
First, can I ask anyone representing Bentry if you could stand up, just so we can see how many of you are here? Thank y'all. My name is Amanda, and I've lived in Bentry since 2006. My daughter Millie has been at Murrayville for 1 year, and already she's fallen in love, not just with the regular teacher, but with the principal and the specials. She feels a sense of ownership and refers to herself as a Mariner. As someone who grew up going to school with the same people from K through 12, I understand this connection very well. This is something I want for my daughter. When Millie's dad left us 3 weeks before she started kindergarten, I was very concerned, but she quickly fell in love. This helped her so much with a major life change I never saw her having to experience. It's for this reason that I chose to fight to stay in the home I purchased with her dad. Nine years ago. The memories made me want to sell it, but the desire to give Millie the stability of staying in the same school made me want to stay. I closed on my loan just 2 days before being told that that stability was being ripped away. My situation aside, it makes no sense to send 20 kids, that's 0.65 kids per classroom, who attend a school just over a mile away to a school in a different town, 6.5 miles in the opposite direction of where a majority of the parents work. With the morning traffic, you're easily adding a half hour to commute to all these parents. Murrayville is literally a 2-minute drive from my driveway to the parking lot. I've timed it many times since I've been told we're being redistricted. I've viewed the district map and the distance from other boundaries, and none are as close to Murrayville as Bentry. Additionally, all of those are closer to the school in the next district than Bentry is to Castle Hayne. Blunt Drive off Gordon and Plantation Road to the north off 17 are about equal distance from Murrayville to Blair. Additionally, Blunt is about equal distance to Castle Hayne as Bentry. Plantation is 5 miles away from Murrayville Elementary. Areas of White Road still districted from Murrayville are only 2.5 miles away from Blair. And before you claim that Blair has no more room, I want to point out that there's an area between Bayshore and North to Creekwood Road that could be moved to Castle Hayne just like the neighboring areas. This would allow areas off Gordon to be relocated to Blair, a school that is equal distance away from them. I know Bentry is just one little neighborhood and we don't seem to matter that much, but we proved 6 years ago that we are a neighborhood that is strong and we will fight for what is best for our kids. And attending the school that is 1.5 miles from our neighborhood in the place we call our neighborhood makes so much more sense. And we all attend the grocery store where the artwork from Murrayville Elementary hangs on the wall. And our kids deserve the right to stay at that school. Thank you.
Thank you. Kristen Griffin.
Good evening, members of the board and parents of Murrayville. My name is Kristen Griffin. I am the mother of Maddox Griffin, who currently attends first grade at Murrayville and resides in Bentry. I'm here to speak as a concerned parent regarding the redistricting of Bentry. The redistricting is being proposed due to overcrowding and only includes one neighborhood. This is my son's first year at Murrayville and in the public school system. He previously was enrolled at Wilmington Christian. Maddox's father and I chose to enroll him in public school last year because we had heard great things about Murrayville. We wanted to give him the same opportunities that we had growing up, going to the same school with a group of kids that lived close, as well as form solid relationships with his classmates and school staff. Maddox struggled in the beginning with the change, but has adjusted well to public school. He was behind in the beginning, but the staff at Murrayville have helped him reach grade level expectations very quickly. We feel the change to public school has resulted in a better educational situation and better aftercare programs. If the proposal is approved, it will result in more than just a school change for Maddox. He currently attends Kaigan Karate, which has been wonderful for him. It has enabled him to focus and provided him with structure and discipline, which is what he needs. Kaigan Karate picks up children from Murrayville, as well as several other schools in North Wilmington. The school does not pick up children from schools outside of Wilmington. Castle Hayne Elementary is not located in Wilmington, therefore other arrangements will need to be made for Maddox's after-school care. If you drive through Bentry, you will see that it is a small, quaint neighborhood. There's no room for new construction or expansion. The number of elementary-age children will likely stay consistent, and if approved, approximately 20 children will be uprooted from Murrayville and taken to a school outside of the city where they reside. Many other neighborhoods in the district are expanding at a rapid rate, and it seems more beneficial to consider those residential areas for redistricting in order to resolve the overcrowding issues at Murrayville. Bentry is situated directly off of Murrayville, 1.5 miles from Murrayville Elementary, and Castle Hayne is 6.5 miles from Bentry. The morning commute to Castle Hayne would require working parents to drive from Wilmington through the outflow traffic of those that still attend Murrayville, through the Laney High School traffic, as well as Trask Middle School traffic. That commute will easily add additional time, gas, and expense to families of Bentry. This redistricting could result in many changes for our son. Changes could disrupt the progress and improvements made in the public school system. The approval will negatively affect my child and my family and cause many hardships for each and every affected family in Bentry individually. In closing, the redistricting of one small neighborhood, approximately 20 children spread out over 6 grades, will not remedy an overcrowding issue. The children of Bentry should be allowed to remain at their neighborhood school. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Gavin Griffin.
How you doing? My son's name is Maddox Griffin, and he is attending first grade at Murrayville Elementary. This is his first year at Murrayville and his first year in the public school system. He attended Wilmington Christian Academy for 3 years prior, and we decided to switch to a public school system because of all the great things we had heard about Murrayville. The school was only a mile from my home. That made the decision very easy also. Wilmington Christian is also about a mile. My son struggled in the beginning trying to make the adjustment to a new school, new faculty, new friends. With the help from his teacher, his mother, and I, Maddox has finally caught up to grade level with reading and writing. If pulled from the school, he will have to start all over again with new friends, faculty, and school. He will have to get a new after-school program because Kaigan Karate does not pick up from Castle Hayne. He plans to attend Kaigan Karate for summer camp also, so he would lose all of his friends there and a great program. Also, also understand that when going to middle school, he will still be attending Trask and then Laney for high school. So therefore, he will be pulled from his peers again, friends that he has at Castle Hayne, to go back to Trask and Laney, which I really don't think is fair. So I won't take up any more of your time, but I just ask you to keep those things in consideration when trying to make the decision for Bentry. You know, like the others said, it's only 20 kids, and I'm sure that some other options are out there other than a community that's right down the road from the school within a mile. But it would be very hard on my son, and very hard on my family to try to start over all over again. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Next item, item 6, administrative personnel.
None at this time.
Item 7, Head Start. Head Start report from Mr. Higgins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, we did not have a meeting in February. It was scheduled for the 19th, and then all the bad weather or threatening bad weather happened. So basically, my report is just simply an update of what's going on at the Johnson Head Start program. It's currently funded for 260 students, 102 are third graders, 158 are fourth graders. And of course, we take fourth graders before we do third graders because we're trying to get them ready. 3-year-olds, excuse me. I apologize, 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds, I apologize for that. And there is currently a waiting list of 140 students, all of which are 3-year-olds. Daily attendance was about 88%, and we have now met our special needs requirements. We had to have 26 students had to fall in the category of special needs, and we have 26 special needs children. New application for 2015-16 are available at most elementaries and at the pre-K centers. And there's also a website where parents can click on for pre-K information at the bottom. As far as updates, the non-competing continuation grant for the year 2015-16 for Head Start has been submitted to the regional office in Atlanta. Based on our grant start date, we are due for an environmental health safety review in the late spring. In order to prepare for that, they have went through training in February, have scheduled a mock review team for March 23rd, and they feel this will help assist them in passing this environmental review. Johnson Early Childhood Center has recently received a 5-star child care license after having a 3 to 4 day state consultant visit and an early childhood environmental rating scale assessed. Curriculum and learning manipulatives were ordered from the early childhood department and are being received now. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from Mr. Higgins?
I would just say getting a 5-star rating is not an easy process for our school, so the school needs to be commended for that effort.
Thank you, Mr. Higgins. Item 8, under information. Item A, policies for first reading. Mrs. Nichols.
We have 4 policies for information only. The first policy is 1234, Board of Education Committee Representatives. And the changes there you can see in red. We have ACES, which is the Advisory Council for Exceptional Students, and the Board of Directors for Head Start. And we're deleting the Equity Advisory Committee. So this is for first reading only. The next policy, 1250, Claims and Judgments. I'm going to ask Mr. Bullard if he will review this for us.
This is a policy, thank you, Ms. Nichols. This is a policy that hasn't been updated in quite some time, and it is based on the statutory guidelines that allow the board to provide for the defense of its members or employees in certain cases, or to cover claims against them in certain cases, and it just provides a little more detail as to that process and updates it consistent with the statute.
Thank you, Mr. Bullard. The next policy for consideration is 1310, and I'm going to ask Dr. Markley if he will explain the Board of Education meetings and new process.
Yeah, we're looking at reforming our process. We had added work sessions about 2 years ago, but in looking at it, we weren't getting what we wanted out of work sessions. So this policy would take us to what's called an agenda review process prior to the main meeting, in which we would do a detailed review of the items on the agenda. You can see the section in red that adds that. You'll also note at the bottom of that first page that the location for that will be the central office at 6410 Carolina Beach Road.
Thank you, Dr. Markley. And the last policy for consideration, 4313, is report cards, and we'll ask Dr. Smith if she will share.
Yes, thank you. There are two major recommendations with this, two major changes being recommended for this policy. The first of which is to reduce the percentage of the final grade for NC final exams and end-of-course exams being counted in a student's final grade for high school courses. And then the second major recommended change is that we wanted to align the grading scale for grades 3 through 12 for all students in the district. Recently, the State Board of Education has approved transitioning to a 10-point grading scale for all high school students, and we wanted to make sure that we were consistent in grades 3 through 8 as well.
So this will be on, it's on the website for input from the community as well as the board. So,
May I ask a question, if I may? I know that the state legislature did away with the teaching follows several years ago, but it was my understanding that there's some push being made to see if they will restart it. And I agree that it should not be Board of Education scholarship and teaching follows, but I'm just wondering if it is wise until we at least know past this year what the state legislature is going to do, because there is a push to strike the teaching follows scholarship. It's not a well, it's, this is not the teaching fellows, is it?
No.
This is the, it's just the Board of Education scholarship.
yes, yes, and we give 2 each year, and there is a committee.
And we look at the teaching fellows as a source for?
Well, we don't have teaching fellows anymore. We don't
Well,
have
I know that, but I
candidates
mean, when
for
we did
that.
have it, yeah.
Yes, they did.
Okay, all right, well, then that clarifies it for me. Thank you.
Mhm. Thank you, Mr. Hayes.
Thank you. Item B is adjustment to attendance zone, Appendix B, Mr. Hans.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, good evening. As you know, the student population at the Murrayville Elementary School continues to grow. They currently have 2 mobile classroom units at Murrayville Elementary School, and Mr. Anderson intends to place a 3rd mobile classroom unit there for the 15-16 school year. Also, in our 2-year capital budget for 15-16, 16 and 17, there is a line item for additional mobile units, and a couple of extra mobile units could find their way on the Murrayville campus, for a total of 5 potential mobile units being on the Murrayville campus. That would probably max out the mobile units that we could place on the campus, and the student population is anticipated to grow by the year 2020 to in excess of 800 students. They currently have, as of today, 711 students at Murrayville Elementary School. Therefore, in anticipation of the continued growth, some students will have to be moved out of Murrayville in order for the core areas of the school to accommodate the students, to adequately accommodate the student population in that area. So we're recommending that study area 34A, which you can see it is right here. It is the only study area to the west of Interstate 40, and that is the Bentry area, be relocated and redistricted to Castle Hayne. There are 22 students in study area 34A. 2 students are 5th graders, and they will of course move on to middle school. There are 3 students that are 4th graders, and those 4th graders have 2 siblings. It would be our intent to allow the 4th graders, if they so desire, to remain at Murrayville Elementary for their 5th grade year, and for the siblings to remain there for that additional year as well, if they so desire. So if the fourth graders do not desire to remain at Murrayville, there will be a total of 15 students, or do not desire, there would be a total of 20 students that would move to Castle Hayne. If they desire to remain at Murrayville, there would be a total of 15 students that would move to Castle Hayne from Murrayville. So we have to be cognizant of the core areas and how the core areas, being the cafeteria and the media center, can support the number of students. That's why we restrict the number of mobile classrooms that we place on the site.
How many students do you expect to be there next year?
I don't know. They continue to grow. We have 711 as of today at the school, so I would anticipate that there would be between 700 and 800 students there. Don't know exactly.
What's the capacity of the school?
I'm sorry?
What's the capacity of the school?
The capacity is 650 students.
How do you expect 15 students to make that much of a change in the school? It seems like an awful small study area just to send it somewhere else.
It is a small area, but any number of students that we could move out will in fact help. That's a classroom or almost a classroom full of students.
But it's spread out over
That's
6
correct.
grades.
It is spread out over a number of grades.
So
That's
use
correct.
the year 2020. By 2020, the new school in the north should be open.
It should be.
New Blair should be built. It would appear from the looks of things that seeing where we are year by year, and I agree with Ms. Kavanaugh, I mean, 15 or even 20 students, I don't think it's going to make a great deal of difference. But what I perceive from what you've got, what you're showing here is a lot of the Blair students are going to move to the northern campus school, which means there's going to be room at Blair for some of these maybe outlying areas to be able to go there. I mean, I think we need, you know, I just have a concern that moving 15 students, I mean, if you were moving, you know,
100.
redistricting 300, yeah, okay, that, or 200, that would make an impact. But I just, and I have a real concern that 15 in this case.
Well, in 2020 or 2019, 2020, when you go through the major redistricting, once the new school in the Northeast is online, and once Blair is rebuilt, all of this entire area will be redistricted, and there will be a major elementary redistricting throughout the county. That will be necessary in order to accommodate the growth and to distribute the student loads throughout the schools appropriately.
We expect that.
Right. And this is trying to just, all we're trying to do in this case is just simply accommodate some of the growth that's occurring up there now. If you recall the charts that we showed, and we know that DPI is projecting that we'll have additional 3,000 students within the county by 2020, and we have been ahead of their projections every year. We don't know if that will continue, but that has been the trend for the last 5 or 6 years. We've beat each year's projections. So we may, in fact, reach the 3,000 students prior to 2020. We might hit that in 2017 or 2018. We hope not, but we might.
Bill,
And that will be before the redistricting occurs. So we're just trying to get ahead, a little bit ahead of the game, and trying to make some adjustments.
And the cost of moving a mobile unit?
I'm sorry?
How much does it cost to move a mobile?
Mr. Anderson budgets approximately $50,000 for a mobile unit move now, depending upon.
So every one of those that we don't have to put
a lot
there,
of variables in that.
In 2020, then we'd have to take it back out.
And what are the numbers at Castle Hayne?
Castle Hayne is slightly under capacity, but they're at 533 as of today. They're just slightly under capacity.
Mr. Chairman, I know this is on the agenda under information, and I know the board has given the superintendent the leeway to make redistricting decisions on a small scale. I'm opposed to this. I know there's not a vote on it, but I'd like to register my opposition.
Well, it's just information tonight, and
But isn't it within the superintendent's purview to do this with or without board approval?
The policy states that for small moves, basically less than 100.
That's what I thought. So it will never be on the agenda
No.
for a vote.
I would like to echo Ms. Kavanaugh's sentiments. The one concern that I heard from one of the parents who spoke had to do with the traffic issues. And when I know very well, having kids who go to Trask and Laney, how difficult those morning commutes can be, particularly in front of Laney and Trask. And it just seems to me adding to that congestion is only going to cause more frustration. So I don't think the benefit, sort of, or what little benefit we'll get from it will be worth doing.
Mr. Chairman, it's on here for information. It's I think in Dr. Markley's bailiwick to make the decision. But am I correct in that it's helpful for you to know how the board feels on this, Dr. Markley, tonight? Mm-hmm. Then I would, I don't think for 15 students that I would put that much pain on that neighborhood. I know that neighborhood. I have a rental home in that neighborhood, and it's a pretty cohesive family of people, and so I would tend to agree with Ms. Kavanaugh and Ms. Koval. Just, Dr. Marcus, just so you know how I feel. Thank you.
Could you geographically, again, say where, you said it was?
It's right behind the Lowe's store
okay.
on Murrayville.
If you're going down Murrayville Road,
it's a small
on the
study
right.
area, and it's
Right
on-
side.
Okay.
Murrayville Road is right here.
It's
Right
the
here, I
one
believe.
neighborhood that's on the other side.
It's right
of-
here, and it's on the west
yeah.
side of Interstate 40. All the other study areas are on the east side. So it's right, it's very close to Murrayville.
Is there nobody that lives up in?
No, that would have been the easy one, but there's maybe.
There are
Up
no
in there?
students in this
Okay.
study area at all here.
Well, you might want to go ahead and rezone that one, or we didn't, while there's nobody there.
Is there, what about the study zones 39 and 38? How much more expansion do you anticipate in those areas? I mean, I know that there's been significant growth in that area. Is there undeveloped land still?
39.
There's plenty of
Kind
undeveloped
of all
land there.
back behind, yeah.
Could you point to that, Bill, for the benefit of the?
Let me see,
I
just a second.
apologize.
It's right there at the top, right there.
Right in here.
Yeah. Plantation Road, I know
Actually,
that there's people down there because
Very
I wanted
little,
to
if I
open the
remember.
new school there and you said it had too many
there are
houses.
2 students in study area 39,
Right, but is there,
and 1 in study area 38.
Yeah, that whole northern tier going across the top, there's
Right, very few
5
students.
kids maybe between all 3 of those
Right.
big areas.
There are very few students in those areas. That's one reason those study areas are so large.
I'm trying to acclimate myself here. I'm just curious to know what, is this land that will be developed at some point, do you anticipate? I'm just.
It might,
trying to-
there's a problem with water and sewer in the area.
And there's
It's,
problem with streets.
in streets. Some of the streets in those areas are very narrow. That's something we ran into when we were looking at where to place the new school.
That's
If you
what I
recall,
said.
there was some land available, but the streets egress and
Yep,
to there were very, very narrow.
Okay.
Plus, some of those tracks are owned by folks who have no intention at this point of
Right.
divesting of them.
When water and sewer is pushed into the area, and there may be some development in there in the future.
I mean, I can read the consensus of the board, and I don't have a problem leaving the 15 students there. But I will tell you at this point, we've got other small redistrictings that involves moving students. Just the precedent you've set.
What was the impetus for the decision? Was it just a normal review process where you're looking to try to, shift the boundaries, or was this in response to a recommendation from the principal?
It's based on the growth of the school and having to do something besides just put the mobile units there. We're already going to place mobile units there, but at some point we can't place any more mobile units there because the core area of the school will not support the additional students. So we're going to have to start moving some students out.
Mhm.
And we thought we would start that process sooner rather than later, rather than having to move maybe 50 to 100 to 150 students out all at once. And we did look at some of the areas over near Blair. We did look at some of the areas moving down into Wrightsboro. We could have moved it down into Wrightsboro. It would have made it a satellite. Mr. Higgins has expressed his opinion on satellites multiple times. So we didn't want to make it a satellite and send them to Wrightsboro. So we tried to make it, since it is contiguous with Castle Payne, to do that. We did look at some of the areas over in Blair, but then it would create, in some instances, it would create a cascading effect where we would actually be moving, in order to move a few students out and get the 15 students out of Murrayville, we might have to move 50 to 60 students or 100 students in order to do that. Moving them maybe into College Park from Blair and up into Wrightsboro, and then moving some down out of Murrayville into Blair in that regard, moving them in the other direction. Because Blair is overcrowded. Ogden is overcrowded. So to move any into Blair, I would have to move some out of Blair. And if I move some out of Blair, then I may be moving into College Park. I can't move into Ogden because Ogden is full. So if I'm shifting in that direction, I'm going to be affecting many more students and many more families by the move. And redistricting is always seen as a negative, and none of us ever like to do that.
But those students are farther away from Murrayville than Bentry is.
Yes, that's correct.
If you look at Wildflower and all those different neighborhoods, they're much farther away from the school.
That's correct, and that's the way it is in many of our districts, because sometimes the school is on the very edge of its district. Blair is a perfect example of that. It's on the very southern edge of its district. So in that regard, yes, there are districts that are in College Park that are closer to Blair than some of the Blair students are.
I mean, at the end of the day, leaving these students here is not going to have an immediate impact. But long-term, in 4 years, we're going to be moving a whole lot more students.
Right, and it makes no sense to move them to Blair now, because you're just going to have to turn back around once the school in the north end is built to shift students around.
You're going to have to accommodate them in the meantime, though. Until those schools are built, until you do the major redistricting, you're going to have to accommodate the growth that happens within the county. And if we continue to beat the state's projected growth, then we're going to be at that 3,000 additional students before 2020 and before you get to that redistricting year. That's the fear that we have. And that's
looking
one
at
of the reasons
Maryville,
we're
this
looking
was
at
the one district that was sort of you could move, that was on the other side of I-40. It was about a classroom worth of students total, about 20 students. But I mean, like I said, it's sure, I can read the consensus of the board. We're gonna leave them where they're at, that's fine.
Okay.
But as I've said, the next time we have another small redistricting move, and we'll be back here again, not at Murray, maybe at a different school. And if they come in, we've got to afford them the same opportunities we've just afforded everyone.
And
Can I ask, I'm sorry, can I ask the principal a question? Are you currently having to use the common areas, the art room, and have you been bumped out of some of those areas because of numbers?
Well, we have placed 2 mobile units there, and Eddie's going to place another one there. I'm not sure if they've lost their art room, but they have in the past.
Yeah.
Right now, we don't have our art room.
Okay, and we haven't gone through finished the kindergarten registrations yet, have we?
No.
We
Just started.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we don't know yet whether or not, okay.
No, we'll learn the growth rate, and kindergartners will continue to come in all the way through probably early September as well. So.
Right.
Mr. Hance, if you would, I know that the northern school is first, then College Park, Blair.
Well, we build the northern school, but then Blair moves to the northern school.
Right.
So
now, but my question is, how far down the road, how many years down the road would it be before that major redistricting is what?
It's going to be
2019.
Eddie, I believe it's 2019, 2020. You will actually, for the 2020 school year, but you will go through the redistricting process in 2019. But it will be effective for the 2020 school year. So that's when all of the renovations, the 2 replacement schools, and the Northeast School will come online with its own student population. Because Blair will inhabit the Northeast School first, while Blair is being torn down and rebuilt. And College Park will be at Sidbury Road. And so.
And where was Wrightsville Beach going to be during that?
Wrightsville Beach
is going to go to Blair.
Wrightsville Beach will go to Blair, the new Blair School. Once it is
Okay,
built,
right,
Wrightsville
okay.
Beach will move to the Blair School for a year while Wrightsville Beach is renovated. And then they will move back.
Dr.
So-
Markley, I know you said that this would set a precedent, but the board does redistricting on a case-by-case basis. And we don't necessarily have precedents because each case has a different set of problems or benefits or whatever. So just because we have registered our opposition to this does not mean that we would register our opposition in the future for a different one. Just wanted to let you know.
It makes it a little more difficult to have that argument, though, to your point, Dr.
Because
Markley, because,
Sure.
you know, we have another situation like this, and it comes before us, and there's 15 students, and, you know, they're gonna say, well, you know, you let Bent Tree stay where they were, why aren't you,
Yeah,
why are you making us move?
Of the 23
It makes it
years
a
I've
little-
been on the board, though, we have sometimes redistricted, sometimes not. It's just a case-by-case basis.
One thing that we can do, if we have to come, not if, but when we come back again for something like this, one thing we can do, we can look at the other portions of the study area, like you suggested, look at those things, but we will be moving more students to actually net a fewer number when we do that. So that will be the effect of that, is actually dislocating and uprooting many more students.
We understand
Is
that.
Blair gonna be a bigger school than it is now?
Yeah, I think it will have a little more capacity than it does
Yeah, I
now,
would
but it's
think
still
we
not
need-
going, it's got 533 students now, so it's not going to have much greater capacity, but it will have the same capacity as Snipes.
Well, I know that
It's
we
also
have
got
kind
bubbles
of
in this,
set,
we're gonna
we
try
have
to get rid
set
of.
kind of an arbitrary number of about 525 to 575 or so for an elementary school, but I'm just thinking, with the growth that's going on in that part, I mean, I'm not sure exactly how big the proposed east elementary is supposed to be, but I'm just thinking that one of the things we probably need to look at is to maybe increase the size of our schools by 75 or 100 students.
Well, Snipes is going, I mean, Blair is going to be a clone of Snipes.
I
It has
understand that.
589 students that,
How many?
is capacity.
Well, 589, but, I mean, the fact is, even as a clone, it would seem that it would not be significantly difficult to add a couple of extra classrooms if we thought we needed to go to 625 or something. I mean, originally, when we built all these schools, we built them for like 625, and then the state came along and cut the number of students you could have in a classroom, and that's the reason so many of our schools, they were built for more students than we're putting in them now.
Well, now, the state actually lifted the cap size except in K-3.
Well, they
So
may
we
have.
readjusted our numbers.
Right.
We haven't done a general redistricting to bring that into being, but anyway.
Now, this is, right now, this is our largest elementary school.
Thank you, Dr. Markley.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hance.
Mr. Chairman, let me just say to Mr. Hance, that I know this is a lot of work, and I can tell you've put a lot in it, and by working with the families to keep kids in the same family together, I applaud you for that. This is no reflection on your work. Just wanted you to know I appreciate what you do.
Thank you.
Sir.
Ditto.
He's been through it enough to where he's
He's used to it.
yeah.
Got a target on his back.
Okay, item C, district partnership with UNC Wilmington for professional development. Appendix C, Dr. Markley.
Just note that that's being presented this month. Please spend the next month reviewing it. It'll be on an action item on next month's agenda.
Okay. Item D, school board pictures. My name appears there. The comments were made to me prior to this meeting. I think it was at our last board meeting about pictures we made. at this board meeting, and it was suggested that rather than have the the group photo that we normally have, it was suggested to have a large, kind of like what our website shows, one large picture out here with the individual headshots of the members, and then when a member
That's the way it
leaves.
used to be years ago.
Right, well, and then when it's much simpler where when someone leaves, you remove that picture, put it on the wall in a news section.
But the problem with that is that it does not memorialize past boards. I mean, if you wanted to go back and look at somebody who was on the board in 85, if you're doing it that way, you don't know who was on the board in 85.
Well, under their picture would be the years of service.
Yeah, but I mean, that still wouldn't, if somebody who was on the board in 85 ceases to be on the board, then you wouldn't know who was on the board back then.
Yeah, you would, look and see who was on the board in 85, it'd be under their picture. If
So
they're-
you, so,
If they weren't, he's
Oh, I
currently
mean, I-
retiring the picture
Right.
to a
Yeah, I mean,
separate frame.
the old
oh,
pictures will be
okay,
up
all right,
there.
well, I mean, if that's
The
the
picture
case,
that's
I didn't
removed-
understand that. I just thought the
Oh, I'm
pictures
sorry,
were being
there,
removed.
there would be one of the current board. Then there'd be a large one over here showing past board members. Their picture would be up there in the years that they served under that picture. So, you'd have to look over there and say, okay, if you were interested in 1985, you could do it that way. And then people do that all the time. They line up to,
Then you can't see the progression and the age set in over time of the board members. Maybe a little weight, I
The weight
kind of
gain,
enjoy
yes.
that.
to me.
The way it was
Watch them
done,
as they shrink.
Mr. Hayes, the way it was done in the past, it was one big frame, and it had like cameos of each of the board members, and so that one big frame had everybody through that particular time, but it was individual shots.
But it was that particular board at that year.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
the way it was.
But they
And
weren't-
then the next year, you just put the same picture in if you want to, and so you have one big frame for the next,
2 years.
2 years.
It's fine with me, just
You
whatever.
can see it over there if you walk over there.
I thought they just left the pictures up. I didn't think they kept moving the pictures around.
No, they don't move, they just,
But you're saying there would be a large one then for 2 years?
Yes. And it was like one sheet of paper, but it had the cameos of each one. It's almost like an album. You know how you have, on an album, you might have individual pictures, but it's on one sheet.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? Do you understand what I'm saying?
I don't have a problem with doing that, but it's the taking pictures out when new people come in.
Well, what do you mean?
Well, my understanding is if I don't run in 3 years and somebody else gets my seat, my picture comes out and somebody else's picture goes in. Now, if you're planning to
But
spread.
then yours would go to the former section where all the
Well,
former.
I
Yeah.
understand that.
You would
but
be
that does not-
current.
That does not tell you who, as a historic fact,
who was
doesn't
the
tell you
whole
who was
board
on the board
at that time.
at that
The
time.
makeup of the board during that
Right.
period, I see what you're saying. What was the reason for, you laughing at me, I know. What was the reason for wanting to change? Is it a cost factor or just?
No, because
switching it up?
there were suggestions made of Heather taking everything from Heather taking the pictures. I think somebody mentioned, a high school student taking the pictures, and somebody, I don't know, there were comments made about
I'll be happy
expense
to
and
take
so
the
forth.
picture.
So I was just,
Do a selfie.
They- I am told
I
the
think
real
Ms. Kavanaugh's
expense,
gonna
the real
enlighten us.
expense of this is the calligraphy.
It's done for years and years. This is one sheet of paper, but it's got each board member's picture, and it's got the date. And then this was one where it's not one picture, it's individual pictures, but it's got the date.
But they didn't take the picture out for the next year. Right, that's what I was talking about.
see, another thing,
He was
Ms.
proposing
Coble,
taking the
that it was
pictures
mentioned to
out.
me was that sometimes with 7 people, now that would eliminate that. If you went to something like that,
Yeah.
then everyone could approve their own shot, for example. But if you have 7 in the picture, it's hard sometimes to get all 7
At
to
one
to
time,
like
it took forever, and I think Mrs. Adams just said, that's it, this is going to be the one. Because somebody didn't like the shadowing or whatever, and
My goodness.
Does anybody have a problem with that type?
What
I
she
just
just
showed
showed,
you.
how would that be? Because that would eliminate a lot of the concerns that were expressed to me.
I didn't have a concern with any of the format. I just thought instead of paying someone to do the picture, we have a fine photographer here, just have her do it. So whatever y'all want to do in terms of the format's fine with me.
Well, that would be a
Okay.
combination. We could have, you're talking about Heather could do it, and then
Right.
maybe the individual shots, one board on one picture, and that's it. And then when there's changes, like next year, or the 2 years later, you do another one, but that one remains there.
Yeah.
Then rather than the group photo.
Now, the only thing I will say, I do think it, you know, because on the website, we all have had our photos taken at different times.
Right, yeah, the
and it's
background.
not,
Yeah, and so
it's
it
not
doesn't look very
professional.
professional,
No.
so I think,
Well, if Heather
It'd
does
be
it, we could do
difficult.
it here and
Right.
have the same background. That would
Right.
eliminate that.
right.
Is that the
For
consensus then? That-
Yeah,
Well,
next.
it depends on, she still has to get the materials and all, so it's a matter, are we saving that kind of money to change
I
from
understand
the
the
quality
expense.
we've had before?
None of things that
I understand the expense is the matting and the calligraphy that they put
Exactly.
underneath it.
Mhm.
Right, right.
So, but we didn't spend that kind of money, certainly not like other groups.
You know, it costs more than you think it did, because I asked Tabitha, she looked it up. It's not,
50% off.
Wait till.
because I was asked about putting them in
Do
all
it
the
every
Who has
4
the food night
years.
specials? Is it
Only do it
Kmart?
every 2
Every 2
years.
years.
Every 2 years.
Because I was asked about putting them in the schools, but you talked about
No.
how much it was
Okay, so
gonna
the
cost.
consensus
We don't
is,
want to torture children like that.
Oh, well. County commissioners torture us when we come in the airport.
Absolutely.
All right, so if I hear the board, dress up next meeting, Heather will be here to take your pictures.
Okay.
and it'll be the headshots, and it'll be put into a thing for 2 years, then we'll do it again. Some of you will.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Next.
Okay, item 9, superintendent's report. Item A, in-school suspension, appendix D, Dr. Markley.
All right, this is actually Dr. Holliday's program, so going to ask him to come forward. But as you know, the board at its retreat about, I think it was 3 years ago now, wanted us to look at how we were doing in-school suspension, and we made some changes to that program. He's here tonight to share some of those results, and also, once we're done, to talk a little bit about what we think are some of the next steps in this.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Dr. Markley, members of the board. Good evening. Before I get started, I'm glad that y'all don't have pictures of me when I started, because if the pictures of me, it would be a little scary.
I
Friend of
do, I
mine-
have a Laney yearbook.
Oh,
You were a
well.
baby when you started.
Well,
I will bring it in and
yeah,
share if you'd
well,
like me to.
well, okay. All right. I shouldn't have said anything. A friend of mine gave us a program for Christmas going back to East Carolina back in 1976. And I was in there, and they all got a good laugh about that. I had long blonde hair. I looked like Ric Flair, a little bit bigger than I am now. But we'll go ahead. You all did, as I said, as Dr. Markley said, about 3 years ago, task us with, you looked at our suspension reports and you thought, rightfully so, we need to do something about out-of-school suspension. So we began working. We started this process in the dropout prevention group. We expanded it throughout our student services division, and we decided that we would take a fresh look at in-school suspension. The overview, you can get back to the overview. We had suspension programs that were kind of all over the place 3 years ago. Some schools had in-school suspension, some schools did not. Some schools had timeout rooms, some schools just didn't have anything like that. But we were kind of all over the place with it. What we wanted to do was we wanted to uniform our in-school suspension programs a little bit. We also wanted them to be more of a learning process for children that got put in in-school suspension as opposed to just holding areas where they could do their classwork. So we wanted to actually teach them replacement behaviors in in-school suspension. So you all gave us positions to put in our middle and high schools, certified teaching positions to put in our in-school suspension programs, because in our middle school programs we only had classified people. So we did hire certified people to go in there, and we provided them training in a curriculum
that they would not only, when they go into in-school suspension, they're there all day, and they're not only doing their work, their class work, but they're also taught replacement behaviors through a curriculum that my staff, specifically Bo McCaffrey and Judy Stubblefield, our behavior specialists, teach our in-school suspension coordinators so that they can deliver that in the classroom. So we actually have a curriculum that we use in that program. So what we're trying to do is not just punish, it's more about teaching replacement behaviors when we put children in our in-school suspension programs. And you might, as an aside, many of you may remember that in some of our community partners had provided some suspension programs in the community. A couple of the Baptist churches downtown did that. They sort of ran out of money. Communities and schools took it over. You all contributed some money to that program for a time. Then we got into the budget shortfalls and we weren't able to do that any longer. But we did have community partners working with us on that. Right now, Mr. McAdams has partnered with Pastor Barnett's church, and he will work, Pastor Barnett's church will work with some of the children who are suspended out of school from New Hanover High School to go in that program as well. These are some of the kinds of things that our principals are doing, but our in-school suspension programs in our schools, instead of suspending a child out of school, we're able to keep them in school, except for the most violent and most dangerous behaviors, we're able to keep them in schools. And like I said, we do provide not only the initial training for our in-school suspension folks, we provide monthly trainings for them. They meet monthly with Bo and Judy, and they provide that ongoing staff development, which you all have said very clearly is the most important thing we do. You can't do a one-shot thing, you have to keep doing it. So we've done that. One of the things that I want you to take a look at, and this is just a snapshot of the data. Next slide. Okay. Well, y'all could pretend. The next slide shows that you're taking a snapshot from one semester to the next, last spring and then this fall. Our most recent data of in-school suspension versus out-of-school suspension. We've actually reduced both numbers in high school and in middle school. This is the trend that's been in place for the past 3 years since we've instituted this program. Our suspension rate in school and out of school continues to go down because you don't want to keep, one of the problems I had as an assistant principal, when I was assistant principal at Laney, Ms. Coble, when I was assistant principal at Laney, we would continue to put, and I'm not saying she ever went in school suspension, I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is one of the problems with in-school suspension, if you don't have a program, is the recidivism going in and out. And that's one of the things we've also been able to cut down on is the revolving door in-school suspension. So the numbers are down, as you can see. And one of the things that I want you to take a look at, and Mr. Shell, you being a finance person, you understand this probably as well as anybody, cost-benefit analysis of this program. One of the tools that our positive behavior intervention support program, which is a part of the multi-tiered system of support, which is the levels of discipline, one of the tools it gives us is a cost-benefit analysis that we take a look at basically class hours that are lost through in-school and out-of-school suspension and the amount of administrative time and teacher time it takes away from instruction. And this is just and Mr. Shell, I can provide you with this full blown up document if you want it anytime, or any other board member. But this is just kind of an example of what we do. Now, as you can see on the next slide, how much time we are reclaiming through not having to send as many children in school suspension and out of school suspension and not having to deal with it administratively. It really saves instructional time and administrative time in what we're trying to do. So that's just a snapshot of that. So basically, in summary, we've developed a curriculum and a program. It's not just a place to send children. We've got tools, and we use data to support what we're trying to do. And we're also folding this into, you hear a lot of it, if you go to national conferences, and I know many of you do, or you hear the national speakers talk about multi-tiered system of support. It's a big deal right now. When we went to DC back in October, I went with Judge Corpeny, Judy Stubblefield went with me, and so did Mr. McAdams at New Hanover High School, to hear the Justice Department and the Office of Civil Rights talk about the whole suspension issue, which is one of the things that Judge Corpeny is working on nationally. And bringing away from that conference is all about the multi-tiered system of support. It's less about punishment and more about teaching replacement behaviors. So that's in summary. And before we get to your questions, I want to just piggyback on what Dr. Markley said. And one of the things that Mr. Hayes has said for years is we really need to take a look at a place that we can use and that we don't have to put children on the street when they need a little more support for discipline. When in-school suspension at the school is not going to do it, and they're not long-term suspended like you all have to deal with the long-term suspension. We got three hearings tomorrow. Y'all know that. So y'all don't have to deal with those. If they're in that middle point where the in-school suspension is not working and we don't need to long-term suspend them, but we need to do something with them. We need some additional support for them. And that's one of the things, Mr. Hayes, you and I have had conversations about this a long time. Well, Dr. Markley tasked Student Support Services, my division, with coming up with something like that. So we sat down with my division and we talked it through. And one of the things that we've got right now is we have a resource. And the building that is we're currently leasing, J.C. Rowe, to an outside provider. The lease is coming up in a few months. And one of the things that we're thinking about doing, of course we'll bring it to you before we ever did this, is to use that building for all of our suspension programs. In other words, we would take the two long-term suspension programs out of Mosley, the Mosley building, move them, the high school pathways and the middle school pathways, move those to J.C. Rowe, and we would create a short-term suspension center based a lot like what we're trying to do in our in-school suspension program for our middle school and our high schools. That program would have its own principal. We already have a school number for pathways, which is the old Lakeside school number. Now, we might have to be moving some things around with how we're using that principalship, but we already have a school number, which means we could get a principal. And then Mary Hazel's going to tell us we're going to have to do some other things too. But I'm just saying, in the beginnings of this process, and what we're trying to do is to eliminate as much as we can putting kids out on the street who misbehave in school. And since we have a building, which Colonel Hance may get hives over this as to how we might have to upfit this, but it really is shouldn't require a lot. We're going to have to go in and maybe redo the kitchen and some other things, but we're not ready to talk to you about that just yet. Just want to plant a seed, is that through your vision and going back and supporting in-school suspension in a more systematic way than we've done before has brought us to this point that we're looking at a much more extensive program countywide that hopefully, if we get this thing up and running, that there would be very few students who would actually need to be suspended out on the streets. We would have a place for them to be short-term. This would be short-term. This would be like the long-term suspension program.
There's a similar program going on right now at Virgo. They partner with the Boys and Girls Club across the street. If a child is short-term or suspended out of school, they'll actually reduce the number of days of suspension if the child will go to the short-term center, get the work. And there's also a parent component where the parent has to come in there as well for some work with the folks over the Boys and Girls Club. So that's a piece that we can add into this. So we've got that model. We've got the model going on at New Hanover. So we think that a countywide drop-in center can truly reduce some of our out-of-school suspension numbers and give our kids, if they are out of school, a place to go do some work. It would also allow Mosley some room for expansion as they move into their new focus next year. We're looking at doing it as a planning point and maybe starting as a short pilot in January when the lease is up with the current tenant at Rowe.
Well, I just want to say I applaud you all for for looking at this. I'm really glad to see the numbers have gone down. One of the struggles in being in the hearings is to know that you are placing a student on the street. So this, as everyone says, I'm the marshmallow, so this will actually really help me in those hearings to feel like I'm not just catapulting these kids out onto the street. So I appreciate you all doing this and looking into it.
Most of the time, and you're exactly right, Ms. Eastep, most of the time, even when we go into long-term suspensions, most of the time, just for the benefit of everyone here, most of the time, children are disciplinary reassigned into one of our suspension programs. Very rare do you folks ever put a kid completely out. It's usually just a very violent situation, but most of the time it's a disciplinary reassignment. But we think this has real possibilities today, and one of the things that we think it has possibilities, if you may remember, we used to have many years ago what they call the Guidance Center, which was essentially an off-site, you would remember, the off-site suspension at Lakeside. The problem with that was getting the work to the children. Now that we have technology, it's very easy for the teacher to get the assignments and the work to an off-site center such as that, and you wouldn't have to worry about shuffling papers. So that's one thing, and we would then have the curriculum that we would be using there to teach the replacement behaviors. So bottom line is we're pretty excited about it.
So look for probably in the August, September timeframe, something coming forward for information and for approval for the pilot to start in January of next school year.
Okay, I know you're not intending, or you're still sort of in the development stage of this, but I liked what he had to say about, what Dr. Markley had to say about the parent component. Are you anticipating putting that in place with this situation as well, getting the parent involved? Because a lot of times these problems stem from situations, outside of the school system.
I could see us offering that as a way to shorten the out-of-school suspension. If it's a 10-day suspension, if you as a parent will come in, do some parent training with us, we'll make it a 5-day suspension. If not, it stays a 10-day suspension.
Right. Used to, and I'm sure you'll remember this, Dr. Holliday, that you could use a conference letter as a suspension in a sense, in that you come in for the conference, but until you come, and wasn't the forerunner of that the ocean science program with Judge Burnett and Dr. Bellamy?
Yes, sir. A lot of those were really good ideas. They kind of fell apart as time went on. But what we're trying to do is there are some old ideas, but they've got some new shine to them, because we do have some better tools to use today than we did 30 years ago when we were doing that.
Sounds great.
Are all the numbers at all the schools computerized? The
Yes, ma'am.
ISS and the OSS?
Yes,
they're
ma'am.
all, okay.
Yes, ma'am. You can actually, you can call me and I can help you, but you can actually go on to the Student Services webpage and go under discipline data, and it takes you right to the state site, pulls up all of our stuff. So you can see that.
What do you attribute the reduction, these numbers going down? What's caused that?
Well, to be honest with you, there's two things. We are paying attention to it, and you know very well the Hawthorne effect. When you're paying attention to something, people really are intentional about what they're doing. And we think that's as important as a program. The program is important. We think that's helping a great deal. We think it's cutting down on recidivism. But the principals are thinking about, when they make those decisions, is this really a child that I need to suspend, or can I do something else?
Do we track, or maybe are we going to track the students from the standpoint of the ones you're saving by these efforts to
Yes.
stay in school
Yes.
and ultimate graduation?
We do.
Do we track that?
We track it two ways. We do a 4-year graduation report, and as well as the annual dropout number. Those are the two numbers in terms of keeping kids in school.
We do.
Are we also, are the principals communicating with the teachers as well to make sure that there's no unintended consequence to trying to keep these numbers down? I don't want kids staying in the classroom who are disruptive to the other students, in consequence to this. Is that conversation happening?
Now, there's no pressure on the principals to say, you gotta have a certain low number. I mean, we put the program in, you still do what you do in terms of regular classroom discipline.
Right. We are, that's a very good point. We have been very, again, intentional about that, and in our meetings, when we do most of this work was in our dropout meetings, which has our principals and our counselors and our in-school folks in there all together, and we're all saying that the easiest thing we can do is reduce suspensions. You just stop suspending kids. That's not what we're trying to do. What we're trying to do is bring about changes in behavior.
Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you, Dr. Holliday, and it's been asked that we take a short little 5-minute break before we move on.